Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast, where we explore the stories behind the journey, whether it's a reluctant leap into entrepreneurship, a reinvention after failure, or a bold pivot toward purpose. Every episode features conversations with founders, creators, and leaders who've taken the road less certain. Today's guest is Jim Koetting, a leadership coach, TEDx speaker, and founder of CEOM Consulting Group. But before any of those titles, Jim was a founder who, at the age of 50, lost everything. His business collapsed, he lost his home, he emptied his savings, and yet he never lost his sobriety or his drive to rebuild. Jim's story is one of reinvention. From personal and professional devastation, he clawed his way back, not just to success, but to significance. Today, he works with executive teams to build trust, align cultures, and transform communication. He's also the host of the Speaking with Authority podcast and a certified practitioner of the 5 Voices and Giant leadership tools. In this conversation, Jim opens up about the emotional roller coaster of losing a business, the lessons he's learned about ego and identity, and why most teams aren't broken, they're just underdeveloped. If you've ever felt like you're building something with shaky hands or recovering from a painful reset, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Jim Koetting, thanks for being here. I'm so glad you're on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking to you, Mike.
Yeah, me too. I'm sure it's a strange feeling, or at least an unusual feeling, to be on that side of the microphone. Usually you're the one asking questions, and now you're on the hot seat. So
yeah, I'm enjoying this, actually.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about a script. You don't have to worry about timing. You just have to sit there and be yourself.
That's right.
You said, I said in the intro that you lost everything, your business, your home, your savings, at around 50 years old. I mean, it's hard to lose everything at any age, clearly. But if you were 19 and you lost everything, you got your whole life to rebuild, right? When there's less in front of you than there is behind you at age 50, that's, I think, even more difficult. When I started my business, I was 32, and I was on the precipice of losing everything many, many times. I was a cat with 900 lives. And that would have been devastating. But I think even at 50, it's even more, because the chance to start over is many might perceive that as much more limited. So what kind of business was it? What led to its collapse? And walk me through that horrible time.
Let me give you some contrast. Before that was happening, so I've been a serial entrepreneur all of my life. I've had several businesses. I've had real estate. I've had retail stores. I've had an online life insurance company. I've had an RIA firm. I've had a lot of stuff in the investment industry and institutional investing. And this company, what it was, is, think of it as the Kelley Blue Book for the bond market. I wanted to compete with a company called Bloomberg, which had all of the bond pricing. If you go to look at the stock market and you wanted to find the price of Apple or IBM or Microsoft, in an instant, you can get exactly what that price is. Bond market, completely different. Think of a muni bond. A muni bond is something out there. You've got your city and they built a bridge and there's a muni bond for this bridge. And interest rates have changed. This thing started at, par, which was 100. So let's say it was trading for, 3.5%. And then all of a sudden the interest rates went down. And so now the value of this bond has gone up. And so now what would we buy that bond for? How would we price that bond? Well, you'd have to call a broker and they would give you a price. And you'd call another broker and they would give you another price. And you'd call another broker and they'd give you another price. And so...
Is that because the value kept changing that fast, or just they charge what they want?
No, they charge what they want. They get to put a
Oh,
little mark in there.
yeah.
They're variable, so you're trying to buy that, and who wants to give it for more, who wants to give it for less, and all this other stuff. And then that, as interest rates change, that price would fluctuate. So if a broker called up and says, "Hey, I got this great bond for you. It's selling for 102.50," you could use my software and go on there and say, I'm seeing it at
Mm,
101.50.
yeah.
What? Where'd you get that? Well, that's what it's showing right here. And they're like, oh, okay, and so they would change the price of the
So
bond, and you could,
your
negotiate a little bit
your
better. Think
software
of it,
took
Kelly.
your software took down the curtain.
Yeah, took down the curtain. So it was very valuable. The challenge is that to build a software and to price bonds on a daily basis and all of the bonds and have all this stuff is very expensive. That data is expensive. A lot of software development and what happened to the price of the bond based upon interest rates and stuff like that. So it's very complicated. It's very difficult. Not a lot of people are doing stuff like that. And there's a couple big entities out there who really kind of had a monopoly on the market. So I was doing very well. And 2017, I won the global award for the best institutional software in the world at that time. It was, a mountaintop experience, walking on stage, Mr. Wonderful's there, Kevin O'Leary, and getting to talk with him and all these muckety mucks up in New York. And so I'm on top of the world, and I'm thinking about, exiting for something like $100 million. It was
Not a bad
growing
gig.
quite good. Well, a couple things happened. One, we needed some more investors. We were planning on getting another investor to come in. We had a couple sales that didn't go through, changes in a lot of different things. So all of a sudden, I have this incredible payroll that I have to pay. Engineers are not cheap. I've got international company, so I've got developers in the United States. I've got developers and engineers in India. I built a whole team over in India, and all of a sudden, I'm dipping into everything that I have to keep this thing
Mm.
afloat, just waiting on that um, next investment, next sale, accounts receivable to come in, and all of a sudden, it just got to where bang, it's gone. It's gone. And so now all of a sudden everything's gone. I don't have any money. Amazon shuts off my thing. My business literally shut down that fast. And you're going through, and it's an analogy of looking like you're on this plane, you're trying to pull up to go over the mountain. You're going to pull up, you're going to pull up, you're going to pull up, and then all of a sudden you slam into the side of the mountain, and it's done. And not only that is okay, well, I've had to let my engineers go, I've had to call my investors and all of this stuff, and all of those companies that I built in the past that I sewed into this company, everything was all gone.
Wow.
Using my equity in my house to make payroll, using every ounce of savings and investment that I have, and every line of credit and everything that I could, it just everything went. So when that happens, going from a real high the year before to the lowest of lows, the first challenge that you have is something called an identity crisis.
Hmm.
And that identity crisis is, okay, I was this smart business guy, respected around by a lot of different people, and now I'm an idiot. I've lost everything. How could you do that? How could you uh, fall apart like that? And so you're struggling to grapple with, who am I now? I'm not a smart businessman. I've got everything I've wiped out. I still have rent to pay, and I can see myself back at that time, and I'm walking up because I'm now in an apartment, and I'm walking up the stairs. I live on the third floor, and as I walk up the stairs, I see that big giant orange sticker on the door, the eviction notice.
Wow.
I was out, and,
Like you thought it couldn't get worse, and yet
yeah.
there it is.
And so, I owned my car. My wife owned her car. We were there. My kids are in college. I'm having to say, guys, you're going to have to get student loans. You're going to have to do this on your own. So not only am I feeling the pain and the stress of having that identity crisis, I have my wife and I have my daughters who are not happy with me, but they're really worried about my mental state. They're worried, I'm not okay, so getting some pastoral care, getting some friends say, hey, you need to talk to Jim. He's really, really down. And so after everything's stripped away and you're just down to nothing, you look and say, okay, well, what do I do? It's very depressing, almost suicidal. In fact, some would say it probably was. But how do you come back from that? How do you rethink through that? So
You and I are connected right now, because my next question was going to be in the aftermath of losing your business. What were your first steps? What were the first steps that you took to begin rebuilding, not just financially, but personally, emotionally, mentally?
Well, one thing, my wife was just amazing during this time. She was, while she's going through the pain and the heartache too, she's very supportive. She's helping me out. My kids were amazing too. They I know they're disappointed. I know they're heartbroken, and I know the challenges. And I had some friends who actually reached out to my kids and called them and say, hey, look, don't go too bad on your dad. He's feeling it. And, supportive family. But I can remember that Christmas that year, we didn't even have a place to celebrate Christmas. We're at the Olive Garden. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just the worst of the worst, Christmas Eve at the Olive Garden. I just, no home, no tree, no, get to spend a little bit of time with the in-laws, but it was so bad. So coming out of that, here's what I did was, one, I have this illusion that it's like, I'm a really smart person. I built several businesses, come up with this brilliant technology and the software, built international companies. I will fill out my resume and I will go out and get a job. Not so easy. Not so easy. You're 50 years old. You got your resume out there. Why are you looking for a job? You have to explain the story. And then I don't have a work history.
Right. You've been an entrepreneur the whole time.
I've been an entrepreneur all my life, And so they can't go through and check my work history. And so I would go through and that was a full-time job trying to find another job. And I was going through the process, and man, it was difficult. It was so difficult. And to keep myself alive, one of the things that my brain works as an entrepreneur, my wife said, go ahead and take whatever entrepreneurial thing that you can think about and journal about it. Think through it. Have your creative spices going, but we're not jumping into anything right now. I think you need a season of having a job. So I'm going out there. I would go through the interview process. I would move up. Oh yeah, he's a great guy. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. And then I would not get the job, and I would not get the job. And somebody said, well, you need to set your sights lower. Like, okay.
So next thing you know, you're going to be working at the Olive Garden. That would be pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, I went down to, I've been a musician, as you can see by keyboards and the guitar for 45 years. And I bought a lot of music equipment from the Guitar Center. So I went in there and humbled myself, said, yes, I will work for you. $9 an hour, 2% commission at the time. This is in Little Rock, Arkansas. They said, well, what instruments can you play? I said, I know keyboards. I know the guitar. I know bass. I know vocals. What about sound engineering? I was like, yeah, I've done sound engineering, bought a lot of equipment. I bought this, and, really in depth on sound engineering. And he says, can you play drums? I said, nope, not a drummer. And it's between me and a drummer. And I'm sitting there. I've got a tie on. I got the drummer in there. And do you have any sales experience? I said, oh, yeah, let me show you my sales experience. And I didn't get the job.
They went with the
$9 an hour.
drummer. They went with
It
Ringo.
just, they went with the drummer. They knew the drummer. And then I went to T-Mobile. I said, well, I'll sell phones. Nothing. Nothing. I couldn't do it. So my friend said, well, you got a good car and it's paid for. Why don't you Uber drive? So I did that. I Uber drove and started bringing in money, driving Uber. And that was tough because, I'm driving Uber and going through that process and feeling pretty low about myself. But I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have a clean car. I'm going to have waters in the back. I'm going to get a 5-star rating on the Uber driving. And I'd pick people up and they would say, well, why are you driving Uber?
Mm-hmm.
And my pride was such at the time. It's like, well, I spent a lot of time on the computer, just need to have some interaction with people and didn't want to get into it. And I said, oh, I really enjoy it. I'd pick up drunks. I'd pick up people from the truck stop who hadn't bathed in weeks. And it was challenging. I could tell you some brilliant Uber stories. And as I was doing that, I continued to look for a job. I got a job starting off as a salesperson. I got a salary of $40,000 a year plus commission. And in 6 months, I was back to a 6-figure income. I was one of the number one salespeople in the company. And that did a lot to build up my confidence and my self-esteem. What was interesting at that time is always being your own boss. You see things within companies that you can adjust and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a really good mentor, a great guy in my life, Jim Zielinski, who said, Jim, this is going to be difficult for you. Working under somebody else and having the boss and the accountability and all that other stuff. He gave me 6 months I worked for the company for couple of years, a year and a half in sales, and then I went over on the software development side. It was probably about 1,000 employees, and did really well with that. Started another business on the side, started doing consulting, started getting back into it. But every little thing that I did was building back up, and just little things for my self-esteem. I went and obviously got some counseling, some professional counseling because I was really down. That was very helpful. I started going back because I'm in recovery in AA. I started going back and spending a lot of times in AA meetings. I spent a lot of times working with other alcoholics. And that was something that everyone always has a worse situation than you. And going back and doing that helped me grow tremendously during that time.
Let me ask you, Jim, how did your 35 plus years of sobriety, since you talked about that, play into your ability to weather that collapse?
Well, in sobriety, one of the things you learn is using the drugs and the alcohol the way I did. You have emotional issues or challenges that you have when you're not, it's always great, after a stressful day to have a cocktail, or when you're up, when you're down, whatever, to kind of relax. Well, I couldn't do that anymore after getting in recovery. So I needed to figure out other ways to cope with, challenges, stress. I learned how to do that by working a program, getting a sponsor, going to meetings, learning how to regulate my emotions. But as things progress in your life and things start getting better, you kind of cut back on that. You don't go to as many meetings. You don't do things. And I had a friend of mine who was calling me. He was an artist, very famous artist, and he wanted me to buy some artwork. And I said, man, I've just kind of got wiped out. And he goes, oh, what happened? And I explained. He goes, when was the last time you were at a meeting? I said, oh, probably a year ago. He says, you need to get your butt back to a meeting. And I went to a meeting, and up on the wall, they have the promises of AA, you'll have these promises as soon as you get sober. And I started reading through those, and I remembered in my life when those were true, but at this time, they weren't true. And I was in so much stress and so much pain that I was just in tears. And I just started going back, and I had a lot of people who loved me and told me to keep coming back, and just surrounded myself by some really good people.
So we've spent some time, we've talked about the collapse of the business and virtually the collapse of you. You were wiped out. You were teetering on your sobriety.
Yep.
You made it through it. And I'm going to, for the sake of my audience, almost do a little bit of a spoiler, because you went from that. You went from not even being able to get a job at Guitar Center as an accomplished musician to probably cleaning up vomit in your Uber and, all those stories. You went from that to this on the TEDx stage.
Yeah.
Okay. That, from the lowest of the lows to, in my opinion, the highest of the highs. I mean, that is something, where is it? That is something I would love to do. That's on my bucket list. But clearly, life turned around for you. And what was the first grip on that success ladder, or the re-success ladder, the rebuilding ladder that you got?
Well, I guess the first step was trying to find joy in a tough situation and learning how to figure out gratitude. So the challenge sometimes is you feel very sorry for yourself, and you're going through all of this challenge, and it's woe is me. Let me tell you how bad it is, and blah, 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 blah. And I had people around me who said, what do you have to be grateful for? And I'm like, well, nothing. I'm just kind of whiny. It's like, do you got a warm bed to sleep in? Yep. You got food to eat? Yep. Mom and dad still alive? Yep. Are you still married? Kids still love you? You start going through and thinking, wow, I have a lot of things to be grateful for. And so going through that process of finding joy and little things, it's like, oh, I had a good rider. I got a $10 tip. I got a full tank of gas. I got, somebody who sent us some food. We got a whole thing of food, one day. It's like, wow, this is great. I don't know who sent it, but boy, it was needed at the time. I got a little bit of a consulting sale here, or I got some video stuff. And you start going through and you say, okay, what are my assets? What am I good at? What are my assets? I'm a really gifted speaker. I've got a great stage presence. People like me. So how do I take those assets and hone them and get better at that? People were interested in things that I'd done. Well, Jim, how did you handle this situation? How did you handle this situation? Not a lot of people can go into, India, build a company, get all the stamps and set up a whole software development. What did you have to do that? Well, I had one of the largest saltwater aquarium stores in the Midwest. How did you do that? How did you build your life insurance online? All of these entrepreneurial things that I did. And then start thinking, okay, I have these skill sets. I have this ability. I need to just start applying these little things little by little. But the first thing that I had to do is I had to figure out how to get joy. I had to figure out how to stop feeling sorry for myself. I had to figure out how to learn how to be happy again. So I learned things like, okay, well, I'm feeling down because I'm not drinking enough water. Your brain takes a lot of water. I'm feeling down because I'm eating terrible food,
Too much Olive Garden.
Oh, well, a chocolate shake and a big cookie from, all that sugar is so bad. And I'm fat, I'm out of shape, I'm probably about 80 pounds heavier than I was right now. And you start saying, okay, well, what can I do? Well, going for a walk, being in nature. What am I listening to? What am I reading? Who am I hanging around? Those little things that I was doing to try and find that joy again, because being in a dark, depressed state and complaining and feeling sorry for yourself, no one really wants to hear that. No one wants to hang around you.
Well, I think most friends have a timer. I know that by personal experience that
Mm-hmm.
you can lean on them. They're there, but not for too long. After
Mm-hmm.
some time, they're like, all right, I've been down this road before, particularly if they're giving you advice and you're not listening. Then they tend to like, okay, you're not listening. Come back later when you're ready. That was my experience. Tell me about your consulting company. You clearly have experience starting businesses. You clearly have experience with challenging times,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, when you're telling me the story, I can't help but think that that was really a curriculum. It
Yeah.
didn't feel like it at the time, but it was more than just an experience. It was a curriculum. You were getting educated. And I like to refer to, if you've ever listened or watched the show, or if you ever do, you'll hear me refer to, in metaphoric terms, the business gods. And some people
Mm-hmm.
will translate that to God or the universe or just destiny or whatever, or just a plain metaphor. But I do think that the business gods have, they're basically headmasters in an old school, like a Harry Potter type school, and they demonstrate certain things. And in my case, most of it really didn't land. It would just be like, oh, that's interesting, more like a little simple anecdote, not realizing that that was a seed that would germinate and be helpful later. And
Mm-hmm.
and the business gods are very patient. They'll say, "Okay, Jim, we're going to show you this lesson," and Jim's going to go, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah," and it won't stick. And then they'll go, "Okay, fine. You know what? At some point, you're going to trip and fall, and all of a sudden, that's going to make sense in its own timing." So I do think that you were on a trajectory that was destined to take you right here, right now, at this very second.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was painful, and it was necessary. It's like a surgery to keep you alive and to make you healthier. And I think all your life's journeys, particularly the what society would define as a failure, were really a success in bringing you where you are today. It was necessary. You wouldn't be the same
Well,
Jim without it.
yeah, I think there's depth into if you've been around somebody who's never been through a struggle, they're an inch deep and a mile wide.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been through somebody who's gone through something, there's some depth there and there's a lot of wisdom, and
Mm-hmm.
it only comes through that. And I think there's a process of going through suffering and learning from it. And not all suffering is bad. Some of the greatest books out there. I mean, you look at Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And for your audience who doesn't know who Viktor Frankl is, he was a doctor in a Nazi concentration camp. One of the best books you could ever read. And you compare your life to, well, I'm not in a Nazi concentration camp. I'm not going through that process and the horrors that person went through. And the gist of the book is they cannot make me feel differently than I want to feel. I have control over my emotions. And I think there's a spiritual experience definitely in going through recovery. I believe my sobriety is a gift from God. I don't think it's a matter of self-discipline, but you talk a lot about finding, God and, giving we all come into, I think, recovery, a lot of us, with a childlike perspective of who God is. And our perspective is where we at. That's where we start. And as we grow and have conscious contact, improve our conscious contact with God as we understand Him, I think that is that's really, really growth. And I think there's some truth in that. God's for me, but I've got to learn lessons sometimes the hard way. I would rather have God just be like in the Matrix, where they put that thing in the back of your head and you just know how to fly a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want. I don't want to go through all the heartache and the pain to learn things, but that's life. Sometimes you have to go through that.
And the business gods will play whack-a-mole with you until you finally get it, right? They will do it. So I started asking you about your company.
The consulting company.
So what do you do? Who do you do it for?
So there's a lot of things that I can do. So if somebody says, okay, yeah, I need you to build a software team, I can do that. I need you to build a sales team, I can do that. I need you to help me go public, I can help with that. If you need me to, there's all these different aspects that I can handle. But I came to one realization that every company, every issue that somebody's going to have is a people issue. It's a leadership issue, and it's a relational trust, communication, alignment, execution, and capacity issue. And so when I go into companies and I consult with them, one of the advantages or the superpowers of a really good consultant, they've done studies and they find that really great consultants, the people that, are the, $1,200 an hour people, I'm not quite that much, but the really great consultants, the ones that are the game changers, they found that 99.9% of them are risk takers. And that's the reason why I've gone bankrupt twice, is because I take risks. And in doing that, there's a learning that comes from that. And there's a better way of assessing risks that comes from taking risks that a lot of people don't have in consulting that aren't really that good at it. So when I go into a company and I look at a company, the one thing that I look at is it's all about people and it's all about leadership. And so I do a lot of leadership development. I do a lot of leadership coaching. I do a lot of leadership assessments. One of the things that I found is that we spend about $60 billion in that leadership development market, and it ain't working. We have some real challenges in this country and in all countries with leadership issues. And people do not understand leadership as they should. So let me give you an example. When you go and you look at leadership books, or you go and you're looking at a leadership speaker or some of the leadership gurus out there, you will find books and books about championship coaches, gold medalists, Navy SEALs, fighter pilots.
Yeah.
You're looking at people who are the 1% of the 1%. So think about it. Championship coach, won several Super Bowls, won several college championships. He's dealing with very, very elite people. And so he's giving you this advice for that person, this advice, this advice. How do you challenge him? How do you get him to grow? And that's all wonderful. But if you were Nick Saban and you took over a fourth grade music band, it's not going to work well. It's not going to work well. So the examples that I started finding that were really great as far as leadership development is, my favorite is George Martin. And George Martin
from
was
the
known as
Beatles.
the fifth Beatle.
Yeah.
He was the producer. You have these guys who are not really that great musicians, terrible equipment. They come in, they've been turned down all over London. They come in to see George Martin. One of the first things that George does is he says, I can record you, but Pete Best, this drummer, he cannot.
He's got to go.
He's got to go.
Yeah.
So, he challenges them in their musicianship. But he also took them out for a spaghetti dinner, which the Beatles thought that was incredible. So he had this incredible balance of providing support and challenge, which liberated them and got them to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm talking with a CEO and he's whining about his employees and he's quoting, General Patton or Lou Holtz or any of these Navy SEALs or whoever, Yako, or all these guys are great, and this is wonderful, but he's not dealing with the 1% of the 1% in his team. He's dealing with people who are still in development. And his people might be down here, and he's got to get them to come up to here. So he needs to learn how to call them up instead of call them out. And a lot of times, entities do not know how to do leadership. They will send their people off to a weekend seminar on leadership development, and they come back and they have a couple tactics and a couple tools and everything else like that. And what they do when they get back in and start working with the team is they typically irritate everyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. I've been that guy. I've been that guy that learned a trick, and I just want to show my party trick to all my staff. And it just like when I was a kid going to Disneyland, there was always a magic shop. And I would be amazed. I'm going to go buy that deck of cards. That's amazing. I'm going to be the favorite friend. They're going to invite me to show them our tricks and all this stuff. And then I get at home and I realize there's no magic to this. You just got to be good. And I wasn't good. I mean, it's the same thing, right? You try and do someone's trick at the company and it just lands flat.
Well, exactly. So these tactics and if I have to challenge somebody, if they don't trust that I have their highest interest, that I'm not out for their best possible outcome and I'm not for them, they don't trust me. They're not going to take my advice and they're going to circumvent me. I have no influence over that person. And so one of the keys to being a great leader is you have to have influence. And one of my favorite stories that I tell is sitting on a plane in 2012 and having great influence on a college student. The college student is sitting next to me. I'm very excited because I have an open seat and no one's sitting in it. And sure enough, this kid comes bouncing down the aisle in 2012. He's got his ping hat on. He's got a book on golf. And I'm thinking, oh, great. I don't like golf. I don't want to talk about golf. And here's a guy who's really excited about golf. So I'm cordial with him. I'm very nice. And all of a sudden I notice a couple things about this kid. One, he's a little stressed. He's coming on the plane late. And I'm thinking, okay, well, why am I here? What can I do for this kid? How can I help him out? So this conversation goes, I said, so are you a scratch golfer? He says, oh, I'm much better than that. I said, what does that mean? He says, well, I'm on this tour. I got a scholarship for the university. I find out that he's stressed out because he's trying to graduate. He's in the last semester of his college. His professors really don't care that he's going off to a tournament. They want his assignments turned back. He's wanting to go be a professional golfer. He wants to be on the PGA Tour, which being on the PGA Tour is not an easy thing to get on, go play with Tiger Woods and everything else. He's reading a book on the psychology of golf, the inner game of golf, which is, the inner game of tennis is where a lot of great coaching material comes from. And he's going out to play in a tournament. Now, he hasn't won a tournament in a long time. So I thought, okay, how can I help him? Bottom line, we set some goals, and he was uncomfortable with what I was helping him with. I said, do you have written goals? He goes, well, not really. I said, well, what's your goal for this next tournament? He goes, well, I'd like to place in the top 5. I said, that is not a good goal. What? I said, one, what you really want is you want to win the tournament. He goes, well, yeah. I said, you're not thinking that way. You're thinking about placing in the top 5. It's not specific. It's not measurable. It's wishy-washy. And I said, it's not written down. So I said, get out a pen and paper. We're going to write some goals down. He's like, what? I said, okay, we don't have a paper. Get your iPad out. We're going to type these in. What's the name of the tournament? Really? Yeah. I said, what's the name of the tournament? Well, it's this. I said, what do you want to do? I like to place in the top 5. I said, no, you want to win it. So I want you to write that down. Gets down on his iPad and he writes it down. Very uncomfortable because he's like, who is this guy?
Mm-hmm.
Who doesn't even like golf? I said, the second one is, what's your next tournament after that? He says, well, it's this one. I said, okay, write that one down. What do you want to do in that one? Well, I want to place in the top 5. I said, you're not getting this, are you? I said, what you really want to do is you want to win that tournament. He goes, yeah. I said, I want you to write it down, win that tournament. All right, so now we've won the next 2 tournaments. That's in our mind. We're thinking about that. What do you want to do between now and the end of the year? He says, well, I'd like to graduate college. He said, great. Write that down. Graduate. I said, what else would you like to do? And timidly, he says, well, what I'd really like is I'd like to qualify to be on the PGA Tour. I said, all right, let's write that down. So he writes qualify for the PGA Tour. I said, by the end of the year. So we have specific times and dates on that. I said, what else do you want to do? He says, man, if I win the next 2 tournaments and qualify for the PGA and graduate school, I says, I can't think of anything else. And I said, you don't want to hit a hole in one? He says, well, you always want to hit a hole in one. His heart wasn't in that goal, but I made him write it down anyway. I get back to my hotel room. We exchange, pleasantries, and I got his cell phone number. I said, is there any tournament that I could watch you on TV? Are you going to be on this one? He says, sometimes they tell it. Yeah, I think this one is going to be televised. I said, oh, great. So back at the hotel room, doing my speaking event. I'm thumbing through. Oh, this is that tour. There it is, Oh, Luke is on the leaderboard. Luke is winning the tournament. Long story short, won the next 2 tournaments, came that close to hitting a hole in one, qualified to be on the PGA Tour, and made more than $1 million the next year, got to play with Tiger Woods. I mean, this kid's life was changed. He'd worked all his life to be on the tour. He was very talented. He was very, very good. But there was a little tiny thing that I just shifted in his head.
So I'm going to tell my audience what your flight schedule is so they can make sure they sit next to you on the airplane and get a little consulting advice. You seem to have changed his life. But it is amazing. I one of my mentors taught me when it came to making decisions. Mm-hmm. A lot of decisions are scary decisions. Like we need to go left, we need to go right. Which way do we go? Well, which way would you want to go? Well, I want to go left, but that costs too much money. I don't have the money and I don't have the time. She goes, well, what if, take time and money off the table. What if you had all the money and you had all the time? Then, well, clearly, I would go left, but I don't. She goes, well, wait a minute. That's the right decision. Absent of the obstacles, that's the right decision. Well, yeah, that's the right decision. Okay. Once in my head, I realized that was the right decision. Guess what worked itself out? Time and money. You almost manifest that. And to your point, he wanted to be in the top 5. He probably would have ended up in the top 5. He didn't even think about a hole in one, so he probably wouldn't even got close to a hole in one. And the fact that you got him to say, no, my goal is to win, that increases the possibility. Because I think again, going back to the business gods, if they were to hear, yeah, 5th would be okay. All right, we don't have to work so hard. Let them have 5th. Next person, the fact that he said it verbalized it, wrote it down, I think set in motion a trajectory of possibilities that would not have been possible had he had not declared to himself that this is what his goal was. Does that,
Yep.
are you in the same zone on that? Does that make sense?
Well,
The
I
way
think
I'm interpreting it?
so. I don't know. I think that one of the challenges is its influence. So I influenced him to think a little bit differently because of my skill sets and my ability as a person who can influence. A lot of people don't have that skill set, and what I'm trying to do in leadership development is train people to have that ability. So one, he trusted me for some reason, built enough relationship that there was trust to where it was uncomfortable to sit on the plane with a stranger, get out your iPad and start writing goals down. And so that influence is one of the things that I think a lot of people are missing, but it's a skill that can be developed and it can be learned. And that influence is something that is to have that much influence on people and attitudes and thought processes is a wonderful thing. And when you start getting that into, as far as consulting, middle management or upper management to where people really have influence, it's a wonderful thing. Brings joy to both sides of the world.
And speaking of influence, you have a podcast, Speaking with Authority.
Yep.
'Cause I think you get influenced by having authority in your space.
Mm-hmm.
That's how to me, that's an influencer. It's not a Kardashian, TikTok, twerker, tweaker, twerker, whatever. It's leading with authority, earning influence, right? So tell me
Yeah.
about the podcast and why'd you start it? Where are you going with it? And maybe
So,
what are you learning from it? Your own podcast.
oh my gosh, the people that I'm getting on there, I'm getting some really high end people. I mean, people who have multiple time best selling authors, speakers, gurus from around the world, people who have had millions of views on TED Talk. I mean, I think that I've got two people on there, and between the both of them combined, they have over 15 million views on their TED Talk, and that's two people. Um, I've got a lot of people on there. One of the things that I was trying to do is speaking with authority is a double entendre. So that means that how do you speak with authority? How do you have people who are speaking from authority? And then also everyone on there is a speaker. Everyone on my podcast has either written a book or has had accolades as a gifted speaker. We're in a place now where people are really hungry to communicate, and people who can get up on stage and really communicate and are gifted orators. I think it's a skill. I don't think it's a talent. I think it's something that you can develop, but people are interested to understand that. So the podcast guests that I get are dynamic speakers. And I think that's more intriguing to listen to, somebody who can
Sure.
really articulate about something, but they're also authorities in a lot of areas. So I've had people on there that, the last one that I had on was Jeremy Kubicek, and it's Kubicek. Jeremy has built an organization, giant worldwide, probably one of the best leadership development organizations in the world. He's had some of the top leadership books out there, The 100X Leader, Leadership is Dead, The Communication Code, The 5 Voices, The 5 Gears. And he is, a lot of the leadership gurus out there look to him for what he's doing. And he has worked with, Pfizer and the U.S. military and Google and all these different, Chick-fil-A, all these different big companies. But to have a guy like that go through and spend an hour with me on the podcast, I will listen to that podcast like 2 or 3 times. I'm like, wow, this is good stuff. I mean, I'm I got it firsthand, but I'm getting it secondhand, thirdhand. I'm like, oh, I didn't pick up on that before. But it's so fun because I get such brilliant people on that podcast.
And you're I don't know if this is the right term, but you're certified in 5 Voices and Giant. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I'm certified. I think that's a certification people need to get, because when you look at 5 Voices is like Myers-Briggs, DISC, Enneagram, all of that on steroids. And here's the challenge: I can be a Myers-Briggs guru, and this comes from a Jungian, different personality types and everything else. And I think you need to understand that, because everyone's brain is wired differently. Once you start understanding personalities, you understand a different language to speak to people. So if I'm a personality, but somebody else has a different personality, if I speak a little bit differently, because I understand how they see the world and it's a little different than I do, wow, I have incredible impact. Let me show you how this plays out with my daughter. My daughter is now 26. You can Google her. Amazing, brilliant editor. You can Google both of my daughters. But
Editor, like a book editor or a journalistic
Weekly,
editor?
Us Weekly.
Okay, so
she is the
magazine.
She is the e-commerce editor for that. So anybody selling anything, comes, whether it's fashion or kitchenware or anything. She's worked for Better Homes and Gardens. She's got Birds in Bloom, Reader's Digest, several different magazines. She's really, really gifted as far as magazines, but she's, I think, working with probably about 100 different writers, editing and doing the stuff. She's just really brilliant. When she was a young girl, when she was 6, 7, 8 years old, I would say to her, it's time for bedtime. And you know what she heard? She heard me say, I didn't say this, but she heard, it's time to fight about bedtime with your dad.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And
we have silent letters and words. These are silent words, right?
Yeah. So it was always challenging. And I started learning her personality, and I learned how to communicate differently. And in one instant, I just stopped the arguments, never had another argument about bedtime again. One instant. All I did was I said, Madison, we're going to talk about bedtime. Little. I said, I want you to know that you're in charge. You can go to bed anytime you want. 9's the limit. I go to bed now? I said, if you want, you're in charge. All right. Never had another argument.
So she wanted a little bit of control. That's it.
Yeah, it's just absolutely the way of communicating. And I can look at personalities and I understand that language. And I'm not the guru like, Steve Cockram or Jeremy Kubicek. But boy, when I start helping other people learn that language of how to talk to a different personality and how they see the world differently, man, it changes organizations.
Having taken the advanced PhD level course on surviving a business failure, what advice would you give to someone who was you a few years ago on the edge of business collapse and emotionally tattered? What would you tell that person?
Well, if it's before or after, the challenge is that after the plane crashes, there's a little bit of peace that it's over.
Yeah, sure.
It's over. So you've got to hone into that. But the advice is that everything that you've learned along the way. So when I was 20, I was pretty sharp, but by the time I was 50, I'd learned a lot more. All of those times and those issues and everything that I've learned autodidactically and everything I've learned dealing with people, I still have that knowledge. I still retain that, and that's going to go into my next endeavor. And my next endeavor is going to be easier because I'm wiser, because I've built all of this stuff up. And I don't have all this baggage, but I can start from zero, and I can learn from that. The other thing is I think it's important to get other voices around you. No matter how gifted I am, I have blind spots. I don't know what I don't know.
Sure.
And when I bring in trusted people that I can bring around me that are really gifted and seeing things that I can't see, ooh, that's really, really good. There are things that I'm really gifted at, things that I can do very, very well, but I need a different background, different personality to help me see things differently. And I think when you look for diversity, I think that is, we'll as a society, when we think about diversity, there's a challenge in that we will think of diversity as everyone having the exact same ideology, but being different genders, different races, different everything else, but we all think exactly the same. I don't care about that as much as I want diversity as far as thinking differently. How would you tackle a problem differently than I did? Now, granted, background's important, but if we went to Dr. Daniel Amen and talked about his 250,000 brain scans, he's going to come back and say, yeah, there's basically 5 brain types, 11 variations. So you got 16 different types of brains when people think about things, it fires differently. I thought, 16 different personality types too. He goes, oh yeah, I could scan your brain and tell you what personality you are by what sections are wired in there. And so that is very, very important as far as helping you with blind spots. And I think we fail as that in leadership and in bringing out people who see things differently.
As we wrap up, first of all, one of the perils of interviewing a storyteller is all of my pages and pages and pages of questions are answered somewhere in the story, which is great, right? So it's not like I think I have control as a podcast host. Absolutely not, because best plans, but you're answering all these questions actually better than just Q&A because you're putting them into context, which I really appreciate. But as we wrap up, just a couple more questions.
Sure.
What do you know now that you wish you knew in your younger entrepreneurial journey?
Well, one of the things that I'm gifted at is I will go after Moby Dick in the rowboat and bring the tartar sauce. Having that ability, a lot of people will not, they'll sit in the harbor, they'll make sure everything's perfect before they take action. But it's always good for me to bring somebody else along that says, we're going after Moby Dick. Maybe a rowboat would be good. We can maybe bring a bigger boat. We really don't need to bring the tartar sauce right now.
A little premature. Yes, exactly.
A little premature. And so having that wisdom around you is very, very good. But understanding who you are, understanding these are my strengths, these are my giftings, but these are areas that I need help in. So one area, for example, I'm dyslexic. I cannot see grammatical errors. I can't see misspellings. I can't see reversed words.
It's very handy to have a daughter that's an editor.
I can't do it.
Good job, Madison.
Nowadays with artificial intelligence, with ChatGPT, with Grammarly,
right.
It's not as big of a deal as it was. But I would have to tell people that. I said, listen, I need your patience because I'm dyslexic. I can't see that. And people are just like, well, you can't see. It's like you're colorblind. You can't see that. Well, there's a lot of people who are dyslexic. Steve Jobs was dyslexic. Lucas, Spielberg, there's tons of famous people who are dyslexic. What it does is it gives us this incredible ability to see things that other people can't see. We can see outside of the box really well. We can see we have great, incredible spatial reasoning, but I can't do certain things. And because of those limitations, I have to get help in certain areas. And there's areas like that we all have them. And so finding those limitations. So if I went back in time and say, listen, understand your limitations, find a helper who can help you through those things. My wife has incredible insights that I don't have. And when you're younger, like, poo-poo that, we're going Moby Dick, tartar sauce, rowboat, we're going. She'd be going, don't think so. Well, as you get older,
Slow
more
down,
mature,
honey.
yeah. Okay, yeah, what were you saying again?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to go bankrupt again, Jim. Oh, okay, yeah, get that.
Yeah. How did you define success when you first started in your entrepreneurial journey, and how do you define it today?
Oh, that is a great question. That is a really good question, Mike. The success when I was younger, I thought, boy, if only I had a bajillion dollars and a Ferrari and, a nice watch and a yacht and multiple houses and all this other stuff, I would be successful.
Well, then you could have gone out after Moby Dick in your yacht instead of a rowboat.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But now I don't see that. Eventually I've got on my phone, I've got the death clock. And I say, artificial intelligence says, okay, I'm going to die in 1958 in June 11th. That's my date right now. If I change my habits, I have a little bit longer to live, but that's 31 years. So what's success? My success comes more from what I help somebody else do and to see the fruits on that. So sometimes you think of, I want success to be fruits on my tree, but I find that when I see fruits on other people's tree, I get more joy and fulfillment out of that. And so success to me is helping somebody else grow, is helping somebody else become something that they wouldn't have become. And that to me, I get a lot of joy out of. Success is happiness. Success is having a good family. Success is having progressive realization of a worthwhile dream. I think there's a lot to what success is. And I know that what I think success is right now is changing and developing and evolving. And I'm always looking for success. I want that, but I can owe it all, know it all, show it all. What is it? Show it all, know it all, and owe it all. And it's not success. Success is sometimes when people's like, oh, Jim, I need to get time with you. Can I get some time with you? When can we get together? When can we get together? And having several people want to be with you. I've got friends, I've got family members who have unbelievable amounts of resources and money, and they're always like, I wish I had my life was more like yours.
Yeah, I think I have many definitions of success. They're very contextual, but one of them is I get to talk to people like yourself and hear your story and your journey, and realize that my journey was not as unique as I think it is, because we all have struggles. All people in life have struggles, but you want to amplify those struggles.
Right.
Become an entrepreneur and start your own business, and it is a curriculum. No matter, I don't care who you are. Great leaders have lost their businesses. Steve Jobs got fired by John Sculley.
Oh, sure.
And had to rebuild Apple. Colonel
J.C.
Sanders
Penney went bankrupt 3 times. Henry Ford went bankrupt. There's lots of people.
Colonel Sanders, didn't get any traction on his chicken idea until he was almost 60, or around that age. So, yeah, it to me, it's a curriculum, and to be able to talk to folks like yourself and other entrepreneurs and share our foxhole stories, we realize that we are the same yet a little bit different, but we go through the same struggles. We go through the same journey. Most of us come out the other side, some with a few more bruises than others, but that's just the nature of this education that we're going through, perpetual education. kind of makes up for the fact, I think the universe is punishing me for dropping out of college. He says, okay, well, we'll teach you this way then. But I appreciate it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I think entrepreneurs are the Navy SEALs of business people. And, we're battle hardened. Well, for my audience who would like to get more information on Jim and his company, if you're one of my watching audience and watching this on YouTube, down here it says see more. Look down there and you'll see information on how to get in touch with Jim and his company. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, then clearly, when it's safe to do so, open your podcast app, look at the show notes, and that information will be there as well. Jim Koetting, thank you so much for your wisdom. Thanks for your great storytelling. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for putting everything into perspective, and thanks for what you do. Thanks for surviving, and thanks for making our business community a little bit better place.
And Mike, thank you for inviting me on the podcast. It's a privilege to, hop on here, and, anytime somebody wants to hear your story, it's so appreciative, and it makes me, just makes my day, to have somebody, you're a great interviewer. You did a really good job. Sometimes a lot of interviewers interrupt and they don't let me speak, and you did a fantastic job. You're a really good podcaster.
Well, thank you. And I'm just much more interested in hearing what you say. I already hear what I say. And my wife is like way overheard everything I have to say. So to me, this is my version of therapy here. This is my little 12-step program is listening to people who have gone through the fire and have come out the other side and are successful in a number of different ways one can define success. It's not always, what everyone else thinks success is. It's not necessarily the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris and the yachts and, all of that stuff. It can be, but to me, that's not success. That's just
nothing wrong with those. But,
nothing wrong with those. No, I mean, it makes life fun, but that doesn't make life rich. And I would prefer what we have over only the public perception of success. So thanks for being successful, continued success, and I'll look forward to catching up to you again. Maybe I'll check in with you and see how you're doing, and we can talk again.
I'd love that. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you.
My pleasure. I appreciate you too. And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast. A special thanks to Jim Koetting for being my guest on the show. You can find the Reluctant Entrepreneur Podcast on pretty much all major podcast platforms and on our YouTube channel. We've already recorded upcoming episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe and get notified when new episodes drop. New episodes are released twice a month on the first and third Tuesday. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. Those two very simple clicks really help us expand our reach. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, I'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com to apply to be a guest. You can also reach me directly at mike@reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com. And a shameless plug, if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and a Kindle version on Amazon and as an audiobook on Audible and Amazon. Thanks again so much for listening or watching. Until next time, be unstoppable.